when it comes to how the axis of resistance responds to Israel's regional, as well as its regional warfare, as well as its crimes in Gaza, how much does Hamas's relative standing in the fighting, in the actual war, play in? Because you've been on this program before, and as I was seeing the reports from Al Mayadeen and other sources about what's happening in Gaza in terms of the fighting, Hamas is very much holding its own. I mean, the location of Al-Shifa was supposed to be completely cleared out a while back. I mean, we were talking about fighting there months ago when, as you said, you had the IDF parading themselves with their PR team talking about, look at these tunnels. That was supposed to be the end of that. The bombing has been just absolutely horrid in that part of Gaza, but yet Hamas is fighting, standing, and in many ways is just not going away. There's no indication that they are going to submit or be defeated. So, Scott, your brief reaction to how much does Hamas, as well as the other Palestinian resistance groups and their fighting, play into how the axis of resistance responds to Israel's overall incursion and warfare?
Well, I think you made an important point. First of all, Hamas is just one of many resistance organizations operating in Gaza. Hamas, of course, was the government, and the Al-Qassam brigades are a major fighting force. But Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, is a very big player, and there's a whole bunch of other factions that have hundreds, thousands of fighters. So a lot of the casualties that Israel is taking credit for and calling them Hamas are probably not Hamas casualties. They probably are either innocent civilian men or men affiliated with other factions. But even the most optimistic accounting says that 85% of the resistance of Hamas resistance is still intact. That after 6 months of fighting, Israel, there's still 85% of Hamas resistance capacity in play. And this is backed up by the fact that Hamas recently met with Hezbollah, met with Nasrallah, and Nasrallah was asking them, is it time for us to pull the trigger? And according to Nasrallah, the Qassam brigade said, no, we got this under control. And Nasrallah put out a figure that was different than the 35%, the 85%. Nasrallah said that Hamas has only lost 10% of their capacity. Somewhere in between there is probably the truth. But the point is, Israel hasn't defeated Hamas, and the Israeli Defense Forces acknowledge this. You see this in Israeli reporting, where they say we haven't defeated Hamas. Hamas is still there, and you see this in the news reporting. There was a battle fought in northern Gaza just yesterday, and when you read about it, it said that Israeli forces advanced into this neighborhood, but were compelled to retreat back to their starting position because of the heavy Hamas resistance. Wait a minute, I thought you told me that Hamas has been eradicated in northern Gaza, and yet you can't go into a piece of ground and occupy it because Hamas is resisting to a degree that compelled you to retreat. So this isn't just one or two guys popping up with rocket propelled grenades. This is organized resistance, which shows command and control, logistics, communication, Hamas still functioning. So Israel's a long way away from defeating Hamas, and I don't think Israel has the capability of defeating Hamas. And the same thing, they haven't occupied Shifa Hospital. They've withdrawn. They went in, they committed whatever they committed. I call it an atrocity. I call it murder. They call it the most effective military operation in the history of warfare. They got their result, but now they've left, and Hamas will come back and will reoccupy that territory. Gaza can't be occupied by Israel, and until 6 months, you got 15% of Hamas. when you want to go 6 more months, so you get 30%, then another year and you can say 60%, but now you still have 40% to go. I see this isn't going to last 6 more months. This isn't going to last a year because of the international situation. Now, my wife always tells me, don't read the comments, but you've seen my eyes. I've been going over reading the comments. And a lot of people critical. They're like, Scott, that's the stupid, most dumbest advice you could give to the Iranians, that we need to retaliate. You guys don't know what you're talking about, with all due respect, to be honest. Because I just told you that Israel's not winning the fight. So what do you want to do to change that outcome? Why do you want to expand the conflict so Israel's defeat in Hamas becomes irrelevant? Okay, the whole idea here, the whole reason why Hamas launched October 7th was not to create a regional war involving Hezbollah or Iran. The whole purpose was to create the conditions for the creation of a Palestinian state. That's it, straight up. And that's happening. Hamas's plan is unfolding. If you look at everything Hamas said they wanted to accomplish, they're accomplishing that. Everything Israel said they don't want to do, they're going to be compelled to do. A ceasefire, a hostage exchange. This is things that are going to happen because Israel can't continue this fight. So why do you want to have the Iranians come in and shake all that up? I mean, I respect everybody's position, but I'm just telling you, you're dumber than dirt. Look, guys, I've been doing this an awful long time. I've provided a lot of advice to a lot of people who are very senior. And I think that this advice would be good advice because it takes into account the strategic realities. You can't get bogged down in revenge. You can't get bogged down in tactics and operations. You have to pull back and think strategically and what you're trying to accomplish. The strategic objective of Hamas is a Palestinian state. A Palestinian state right now is on the table. People are talking about it in ways that they haven't been talking about it ever. And it's there. And that discussion will continue to evolve the more Israel finds itself in a strategic bind. But if you turn this into, I'll just give you an example, and just again, people, please reflect on this. On October 6th, nobody was talking about the Palestinian people. I know Richard Medhurst wears, Danny Hannafong does. There's some people out there, but none of the big players in the world, Danny, no offense, but it wasn't on the president of the United States table. It wasn't on any of the tables of the big players out there. Saudi Arabia could care less. They were ready to go into this, India, Middle East economic corridor. So was Jordan, the UAE. Everybody's talking about normalization of relations with Israel, which means that you had to embrace the Abrams Accord, which was about endorsing West Bank settlements, which broke the back and the viability of any Palestinian opportunity. So if anybody was talking about a Palestinian state, it was a lie. We support a Palestinian state, but you don't, because you support the Abrams Accord, you support the partitioning of the West Bank, the continued expansion of settlements, and the normalization of relations with Israel. Israel, which when they talk about these expansive economic factors, are talking about from the river to the sea. We're not allowed to say that if we articulate in support of Palestine, but if you're on the side of Israel, you can say that. Likud makes it part of their formal mission statement. But Israel has been talking about greater Israel, no Palestine, boom. And that's the direction this was heading. This was heading to the Palestine was done. So now it's on the table. The best way to finish that and kill it and put a stake through the heart of this is to change the discussion to global energy security. Because you want to know what are going to make people stop going in the streets demonstrating for the Palestinian people? $120, $200 a barrel gas, oil, $10 gas at the pump. Imagine that. You think the American people are suddenly going to go, well, I'm grateful we're paying $10, but Palestine must be free. No, they're not going to be talking about Palestine ever again. They're going to be talking about other things that matter the most. It's the economy, stupid. So it would be stupid to get the American people focused on the economy at a time when you claim your strategic objective is the creation of a Palestinian state. That strategy is unfolding, and it is viable now in a way it's never been viable. But the way you kill it is to make this a broader war where we're talking about Iranian oil production, Saudi oil production, UAE oil production. We're talking about disruption of oil the oil flow globally. We're talking about a global recession, a global depression. No one's going to give a damn about Palestine. They will never talk about Palestine again. So with all due respect to the people out there saying, Scott, that's just horrible advice, pound sand, because it's not. It's the kind of advice you give to people when you're focused on strategic objectives and keeping your eye on the ball, which in this case should be the creation of a Palestinian state.
Yeah, and the also your point too of if there is a retaliation that leads up this escalation ladder from earlier, then indeed you now have a regional war, one where Israel has more than has shown that it's more than willing to go further than what humane people in the region, these countries in the axis of resistance, these forces, these organizations, they do have humanity's interests at heart as well. It's not simply a matter of destroying and defeating Israel at all costs. That cost would be very, 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 very heavy should this end up becoming a massive regional war, of course, that would pull in the entire world, which then has the consequences you mentioned, plus many others, not to mention the fact that you have a world situation where there's a lot of support for Palestine. How much global support would there be for Iran in the West? How much, it's a much different story. So there's a lot to consider. And I do believe that's why, while Iran is very much looking toward a response, it also is taking into account the balance of forces in the world, in the region, and how all of this will play out, and Palestine's interests at heart as well, given that that is where the fighting is happening, and that is where there is this huge existential question, as you said, Scott, of a Palestinian state, of self-determination for Palestinian people. A lot of that could be derailed from a bigger and wider conflict at this moment. It doesn't mean it'll never happen. I am with you, Scott. I believe it's going to happen eventually. It seems pretty inevitable, but is this that moment? Scott, do you have time to just go over it's been a while since we talked about Russia, Ukraine. You mentioned earlier the Crocus attack, but there's been a lot going on. I just wanted maybe if we could spend some time. Do you have time to go over some of that? What's been going on there?
Well, I think the way to transition it is to talk about what you just brought up. You said, how much support would Iran have in the world today? The answer is not enough. Iran is in a difficult position right now. They're in a transition period. China has provided Iran with a great opportunity. And that is, the normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia. And now we have the expansion of BRICS, where Iran and Saudi Arabia are part of this institution that is seeking to promote multipolarity as an alternative to American singularity. But it's early in the stages. BRICS doesn't have these institutions. That's the importance of the meeting taking place in Kazan in October, chaired by Russia, to talk about the creation of these institutions, to begin to formalize an economic, a political, and when we say political, that means by extension military, even though there won't be a military alliance with BRICS. When you become politically engaged with nations, your militaries begin to cooperate because you have to jointly protect your shared common economic interests. You have to protect your geopolitical vision. But this takes time to evolve. And this is the direction Iran's heading. Right now, Iran and Russia are working on, their relations have not always been good. I mean, understand that, back in the Soviet Union, when the Iranians cracked down on, I think it was the Tudeh party, the Communist Party, that sort of made the Soviets mad, the Russians mad. And the Iranians are, a theocracy that looks askance at Russia, or at least in the past has. But now they're trying to repair their relations. They have common cause, common interests, but their interests haven't evolved to the point where they are truly intertwined strategically. And so Iran has to be careful about creating too much trouble for Russia, which, although they're doing well, this wasn't automatic for Russia. There was a lot of work that had to happen for Russia to survive Now, what was the 16th round of sanctions coming up this month? Vladimir Putin himself has acknowledged that in the late summer, early fall of 2022, he didn't know which direction the Russian economy was going. That's why he was hesitating on, do I mobilize? What do I do? How do I respond to, NATO and the United States with this new Lend-Lease, billions of dollars flowing into Ukraine? How do I respond? I can't overreact in terms of mobilization because the economy may not be able to sustain the workforce being reduced in such a dramatic fashion at a time when I'm trying to increase defense production. And then it turned out that things were okay, that the economy didn't shrink 25%, it shrank 3%. And then it looked like they were going to expand, and they're growing now. So Russia's in a comfortable place, but it doesn't mean that they're out of the woods yet. They're still, they're still out there chopping trees. Nothing's taken for granted. And so now you have the Russians playing this game where they're trying to build economic ties with China, with India, with the global South, with Iran, with everybody. But they have these relationships haven't had a chance to mature. We're talking just, some cases, this new reality that's only 2 years old. It hasn't matured yet. It hasn't built the roots necessary to hold firm. And so if Iran gets involved in this crazy escalation that leads to a general war that, has Russia say, God, if we go all in with Iran, our economy could collapse. We haven't solved this Ukraine problem yet. No, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. We're not going to, we'll jettison Iran as opposed to bringing down the entire ship. I'm not saying that's I'm not saying that's what Russia would do. I'm just saying that has to be a discussion that would be had in Russia and everywhere else. And so, the Russians right now this is, again, one of the great advantages of Russia, their emphasis on diplomacy. And so I think you're going to see the Russians arguing for diplomacy, which is another reason why I don't think the Iranians are going to do something precipitous in terms of retaliation, because I think the Russians are telling them too, guys, we're not there. We've got everything, all our ducks lined up so we can finish this Ukrainian thing, and it's looking pretty good for us this summer, etc. You go off and get involved in a global conflict that causes a diversion of resources, a disruption of the economy that we need to sustain to be able to get victory, and they can become problematic for us. So let's not go that route. Let's calm down, take the hit. We'll work our way, we'll get to where you can retaliate. We'll find an appropriate form of retaliation that doesn't lead to escalation. But, Russia's on the right track right now, and they don't need anything to throw them off that track. And so now I've hopefully successfully transitioned into Russia.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.